Ink-a-dink, 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 ink-a-dink. Wow!
Oh, hey, look at that. Hello, Basil BuddhaCat presents. Basil, it's Davy Crockett. Well, what better guy to get involved in a, well, the Alamo is 14, 15 years before the Mexican Revolution, but, you know, it's kind of apropos. Hey, Davy Crockett, hold on a little bit, because we're getting ready to go on the air pretty soon. Hold on. Put you on hold for a second. Okay. 'Twas the eve of the Mexican Revolution, and all through the land. Come on, Basil, help me out a little bit here. Help me out a little bit. I'm going to be on the air pretty soon. We got to get ourselves oh. Red light's on. Okay. Welcome to Basil BuddhaCat presents exclamation point. Basil-Athon, hour number 1860. And we've been on the air for however many days 1860 hours is, and we're mighty bushed. So that's why I'm doing some catfishing. So okay, back to the poem. 'Twas the eve of the Mexican Revolution, when all across the land. Okay, hold on. See if you're still there. Basil BuddhaCat presents. Yeah. Tweety, take a look at the, this phone call's not just coming across space, but it's coming across a couple of centuries. Yeah, Tweety says, yeah, it's coming from San Antonio, Texas, and it's coming by way of carrier pigeons, so it's got to be old. It's got to be, So, David Crockett, we're doing our Basil BuddhaCat presents exclamation point. We're doing our Basil-Athon 2016, hour number 1860, and it's the Mexican Revolution, and I don't know about Mexico, but all across this land, the United States of America, there's all kinds of crazy-ass revolutions going on. You got presidential primaries. You got insurgent candidates that never would have regularly made much headway into the nominating process, and okay, we'll get back to you. We'll get back to you, Davey. So hold on. Okay. Hello. No, Elsie. No. Elsie, it's. Well, first of all, I know what you're kind of making your way across the Texas plains. But, yeah, come on. Try again. Okay, hold on. That's better. That's better. Hey, Elsie, how you doing? Okay, are you sauntering across the Texas plains on your way to wherever you're on your way to? Basil, Elsie is, like she said, she's sauntering across the Texas plains. So what's we're doing. We're in the middle of our Basil-Athon 2016, and we're actually dedicating this hour because it's the eve of the Cinco de Mayo, and I don't know. I guess you could say, "Wow, hold, put this hat down for a moment." It's a heck of a hat. And I'm here doing some catfish, and we got all kinds of stuff going on. We've been on the air for 1,860 hours now, and we're pretty bushed. But while we were in between shows, we snuck away Saturday evening, and we watched the Basil and I and Kristen watched the presidential the thing they do every year, the roast of somebody comes on and roasts the president of the United States, and the president gets up and makes some jokes, and Basil says he was very interested to see Larry Wilmore, and Larry Wilmore did something that a lot of people took. We think he took it the wrong way. A lot of people took it the wrong way. Not Pierce Brosnan, but Pierce Morgan on CNN. He seemed pretty annoyed by the fact that Larry Wilmore used what he thought was the word that starts with N. It's called the N word, and it starts with N and ends with R. It's 6 letters long, and it's got apparently a bunch of little stars in the middle of it, and Larry Wilmore came on, and what, Basil? Basil, I'll have to interpret. Basil said he's got his own special treatise of doing the thing. Basil doesn't do with that like some of his African friends do. I mean, this is not a sign of disrespect. If somebody else besides a black person uses that word, that 6-letter word, it can be pretty offensive and pretty degrading, and it's pretty darn nasty. But black people, it's different, and I understand that perfectly well, because I'm Irish, and being Irish, I could talk to other Irish people. And I can call them a Mick. I can call them a lot of things that if somebody other than an Irish person used, it'd be pretty offensive to me and to other Irish people. But when you're doing it amongst yourselves and using that language amongst yourselves, whether it be an Irish person talking about their fellow Irishman as a Mick, or many of the other things that designate Irish people. Italians can call another Italian Goomba. They can call him all kinds of things. They can Latino or Hispanic people can use the word. Puerto Rican people can use the word spick, and that's okay for somebody to use amongst company that they're close to. So apparently Wilmore on his closeout of his speech, and he got pretty bad. I'm catfishing. Well, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing this for, because Walter BuddhaCat, we're in the Comcast studio. We're not home. We're not where we're supposed to be. We don't have the piano behind us. We don't have all the other stuff. We don't have the Jimi Hendrix Axis Bold as Love behind us. We don't have a Dvorak New World Symphony. We don't have Emerson, Lake and Palmer pictures at an exhibition. We don't have any of that stuff. We're in the studio, and these trees here, I got a little surprise for you. They're not real. All fake. But whatever you do, just don't think that the cat of all cats is fake. This is a two-dimensional avatar of Basil BuddhaCat. Basil's been gone for about 4.5 years. He was 18 years old, and we saw him going downhill pretty quickly, and Kristen and I decided that we'd do a TV show, first on Comcast, and then we have it on Cablevision. They didn't allow us on Charter for some reason. They panned the show and said it was a little bit too risque, and they decided not to allow us to infiltrate our show onto Charter in Newtown. But we got it onto Comcast. We got it onto Cablevision in Norwalk. We have it up on YouTube under Kristen 40, Kristin 40. That's Kristen's YouTube channel. And we also have it, of course, on Facebook, on Basil BuddhaCat's Facebook page. You could look all the shows up there. And what do you mean it bothers you that I'm catfishing? It's we used to do this with you all the time. We do this with Walter Forrest Cat. We do this with Oswald Cobblepot. Now we've got Oswald Cobblepot. We have an avatar for Oswald. Oswald looks pretty much like this, about the same size. The only difference being that the real Oswald Cobblepot, or as he came to us with the Chinese name Sa, came to us from good friends. This Oswald doesn't have a white tip at the end of his tail like the real one does. But other than that, he's a pretty good facsimile. So, you want me to get Davy Crockett back on the phone? Yeah, I know. Okay, yeah. Basil said. So put the hat back on. Okay, I'll do it. Okay. Since we're doing Cinco de Mayo, we're got to look the part. You don't have a hat on, Basil, but I see that the other Basil is the ceramic Basil has a Cinco de Mayo, has a Spanish hat on, and is this show going to be commercial free, or are we still trying to get some corporate sponsors back? Now Basil had some corporate sponsors. We got some a few years ago. Some cha-ching was coming in. We had some money coming in. We had what did we have? Oh my gosh, we had not A&W root beer, but we had P.A&W root beer, and that was Basil's beverage of choice. And some money was flowing in from that. And for some reason, unbeknownst to Basil, but quite well known to me, P.A&W root beer chucked us off. They chucked us away. And reason being is that, we had Tootsie Roll, we had Hershey's Kisses, we had, Basil's candy of choice, and we had Basil's beverage of choice. And somewhere along the way, Basil started telling this story about something about how do we know that P.A&W root beer is Basil's beverage of choice, and how do we know that Hershey's Kisses and Tootsie Rolls are Basil's candy of choice? Well, apparently Basil kept saying all you have to do to know that for a fact. Your only evidence you need is to look in his litter pan. And for some reason, that didn't go over well with now P.A&W root beer. Is that Pepsi or is that Coca-Cola? It is Dr. Pepper 7-Up, 5301 Legacy Drive, Plano, Texas 75024. A&W Concentrate Company. And we had the thing, and then we lost that. We had what other corporate sponsors we had? We had some pretty good ones. I mean, we had Dermasil from Abbott Labs, and Dermasil was a good paying sponsor. I mean, they But Basil kept calling them up during our Sunday morning show, and he's got this thing about being annoyingly truthful. And he would call up Dermisil because the Abbott Labs, because the product had on the front of the label, it said 25% more. Basil kept calling up and asking, 25% more what? And, it's amazing that we found anybody in Abbott Labs on a Sunday morning, but we did. So Basil kept calling up and asking them 25% more, and eventually they got annoyed and took the sponsorship away from us. So, we've had some great stuff. I mean, we've had, oh, hey, look at that. And we have these, we have them up in the, up at home, up in the corner of the dining room where we do the show. But we have, they followed us here. They're up in the hammock. Bill Murray and Ghostbusters fame. And Bill's a little ticked off because he's a little annoyed about the fact that there's apparently another Ghostbusters now. And, he says there'll never be another Ghostbusters. And, it'll never be like it was. And he's pleased with the fact that the women are the women that are the Ghostbusters this time around, and he's pretty happy about that. But we've got him up in the hammock along with Stephen Colbert. Now Stephen Colbert's been up in the hammock ever since he left the Colbert Show. Well, he took a couple of weeks, and they taped him 24 hours a day, 24/7. They taped him for a couple 3 weeks. First he went out to a little cable television station up in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, somewhere up there, and did a cable television show. And on the show he had, it's out on YouTube, you don't have to take our word for it. He had Eminem on, and of course Eminem, Marshall Mather, and he had Eminem on, and had a little something. The show had something to do with he's questioning who the heck's Marshall Mather, and he didn't seem satisfied with the answer that he got from Eminem. So he did that show. He had the cameras rolling on him 24/7 for a number of weeks, and now on the new show, Late Night with Stephen Colbert, they just play back half hour, 45 minutes at a time, with a couple of commercials interspersed, and they play back those weeks and weeks of following him around 24/7, and that's it. I mean, they could use those shows for, we figure, about 7.5 years. So Murray can be up there. Murray and Colbert. Colbert can be up there for a number of years, and we've got also. Along with them, we have Drew Carey. Now, Drew Carey took a little ribbing from us back a few years ago, because when Craig Ferguson started to consider leaving his show, and even before then, he had some guest hosts, and one of them was Drew Carey. And Basil, we just didn't really think that Drew Carey did a very good job as a guest host, and thankfully, he didn't end up being the replacement host for Craig Ferguson on the Late Late Show. But here's the thing. The Late Late Show with Craig Ferguson got a new host. Craig left, and he's off doing stand-up comedy or something or other. And they got a new host for the show. And the host is so bad, for lack of a better word, that we kind of wish Drew Carey, and we kind of got into tweaking Drew Carey's nose a little bit. We ended up referring to him as LFFF, and we can't use that kind of language on evening television, but let's just say the L is little, the first F is formally, the second F is fat, and the third F is, well, figure it out. So Drew Carey, he's up there. Bill Murray, Stephen Colbert, Drew Carrier up there in the hammock here at the Comcast studio. Got a good audience. We're not going to show them to you because then you may get the idea that we don't really have an audience. But we'll reach out to them in our. Okay. So we've been talking about, like I said, we've been on the air for 1,800 and going on in 1,860 an hour, and of course the significance of that is that the Mexican Revolution began about that time. It went for about 5 years. They threw off the shackles of Spain and became their own country, and they weren't doing too well prior to that because they had a little chunk of Mexico which they called Texas, and they had some settlers there from the United States. Davy Crockett from Tennessee. They had Jim Bowie, who invented the Jim Bowie knife, and actually, he is David Bowie's. No, he's not. But anyway, so Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett, they're down in Mexico, and Mexico had outlawed slavery a couple of decades earlier, and this is back in 1848. In the 1840s, when the Alamo took place, they were growing cotton down there, and cotton is a very labor-intensive crop. And because of that, they had slaves, and that's what you need when you have labor-intensive. I mean, you could have poor people working in factories, but at least they got to leave the factory, go home, stumble into bed, and starve and not be very well off. But slavery is a little bit different in that it's they don't call it slavery for nothing. So Mexico came to the Texicans and said, "Hey, you know what? Our country has been slavery-free for decades, and that's it. You're not going to have slavery anymore." And the Texicans said, basically, they gave them that, and they said, "We're going to leave Mexico. We're going to become part of the United States. We're going to become a state in the United States because all the southern states at that time were slave states, and they saw that as the only way to continue the practice of slavery. So they got into this tussle with Mexico, and the Mexicans came in and brought Santa Anna's army in, and that's Santa Anna the general, not Santa Anna the wind. That's a whole other thing. That's California, and seeing that this year, and it's pretty nasty. It's been bringing some pretty hellacious weather to California, and from there across a lot of the United States. So Santa Anna, Generalissimo Francisco de Santa Anna brings his troops in and says, "Well, that's it, boys. You are now officially going to be slave free." And the Texicans said, "Nope, we're going to keep our slaves, and that's it." So the Mexicans brought their army in and chased out all the slaves. They sent the slaves packing to be free. They sent women and children packing to wherever they decided they wanted to go to, and they came in and they waged war on the Alamo and ended up killing, I think, all of them, and that was it. So we had a discussion. Now, see, Basil's got a good friend that lives in Houston, Texas, that we know through Democracy for America, named Robert Oler. And Robert's had a very illustrious career. He's worked for National Aeronautic and Space Administration. He's worked for NASA. He's done a lot of pretty interesting things in his lifetime relative to the aerospace industry, mostly government. And we had a tussle back when we first brought this subject up to Robert. And our good friend Robert Oler said, "No, there's no way in the world. I mean, this was an illustrious time, and these folks were heroes, and they were fighting for a noble cause, and they just wanted to stand up to the big bad Mexican army." And we said, "No, it's slavery." And Basil actually sent me down to San Antonio I went down for a Coldwell Banker convention, and Basil sent me on a special trip to the Alamo. And I went in there and took the tour, and somewhere during the tour, I mentioned the business about the Alamo and the siege of the Alamo being about slavery and ending slavery, and tour guide took a little bit of offense to that, as did probably all the red-blooded American souls that were there taking the tour, hearing the great story about how wonderful they were. And so, let me check. I think, wait a second. Hold on. 1 second. It is Cinco de Mayo, after all. Maybe we ought to do the song about the cockroach, but that's not Mexican, that's Cuban, so that's not going to work. So one of these phones, now wasn't the Cat in the Hat phone, because we reserved the Cat in the Hat phone. Yeah, okay, yeah. Lilith, tail included, free of charge. Who was named Lilith, tail included, free of charge, because Basil came with about an inch long tail, a little nub. And, of course, he describes that as being the perfect tail. It's the perfect length for a tail, and that's just it. But Lilith came to us a little later from the DAWS, from Danbury Animal Welfare Society, and she came with a big puffy tail, and we got her and the tail for one price. We didn't have to pay extra for it. So that's how she became Lilith, tail included, free of charge. Now, Lilith passed away October, a couple of years ago, last October. And you see her in the beginning of the show and the ending of the show. But as a word, Lilith came back to us the following Easter. And the calico cat came back as the calico stone. And we know it's Lil because here's the head, okay? Here's the big fluffy tail. And everything in between is Lil. I guess there are a couple of things that I think are ears. And it weighs about as much as Lil did, only a little bit more condensed than Lil was. So she nestles there on stage in Basil's big puffy where the wild things are slippers. And hey, look at that. Are we getting Vaseline back as a corporate sponsor? Basil says no. That's leading into our political segment of the show. Okay, we've been doing the Democratic and Republican primaries. Basil started out in 2012. We had almost all of the Republican presidential candidates on. We had, and these are all, of course, cataloged on Basil BuddhaCat on Facebook and Kristen 40 on YouTube. But we started off with Michelle Bachmann. If you remember, Michelle Bachmann was a candidate for the Republican nomination for president. And she had an interesting campaign. She went out to Iowa and went to the town that she announced proudly, "It's so good to be here in the town where John Wayne was born." Sure enough, actually, the town she was in was the town where John Wayne Gacy, who murdered kids and ate them. It's the town where John Wayne Gacy was born. So she was just off by a little bit there. Then she went up to Concord, Massachusetts, Concord, New Hampshire, for the New Hampshire primary, which is the second primary after Iowa. And she announced boldly that it was so good to be here in the town where the first shots were fired in the American Revolution. And one minor oversight was that the town where the first shots were fired in the American Revolution were actually Concord, Massachusetts, Lexington and Concord, Massachusetts, not Concord, New Hampshire. So another faux pas on her part. When we went from there, we had Ron Paul on. Now this year we didn't have Rand Paul on because he fizzled out pretty quick. But we had Ron Paul on in 2012. We had Newt Gingrich on, who we got some pictures of him giving a speech at a military museum up next to Lake Winnipesaukee when Basil sent me up there to scope out the situation. And Newt Gingrich, who's best known probably for, he's probably maybe a little bit better known for the fact that he just about shut down government actually did shut it down in a battle with Bill Clinton over the budget. But Newt Gingrich, he gave a speech there in a little town on the edge of Lake Winnipesaukee, New Hampshire. And it was in the military museum, and true to form, because Newt had, I think he's on his third wife or fourth, which is not unusual because a lot of us have been married multiple times. But what's a little bit unusual about Newt Gingrich is that he started dating his second wife while his first wife was in her hospital bed dying from cancer. And I don't think he ever brought the wife number 2 by to meet wife number 1, but he started dating her at that point. And then later on, wife number 2, well, you got to fact check us on this one because it's been 4 years. Wife number 2 is I think equally doing poorly, and Newt starts dating wife number 3. So he's there in the museum, in the military museum, and he's standing, and behind him is a big World War II tank with, and I'm sure Newt probably envisioned the tank as being his anatomy and the turret of the tank being his monster, can we say penis on the air? Oh, okay. I guess we just did. So Gingrich is there giving a speech, and it wasn't all bad. We didn't meet Mitt Romney, but we met Jonathan. It's another candidate from Utah in the 2012 Republican presidential sweepstakes, and we didn't meet the candidate Jonathan, but we met his 2 daughters in a diner and got to talk to them a little bit. And John Huntsman, that was his name. He didn't think he had much of a chance in the Republican primary because he was a little bit too moderate, and the Republican Party is not overly known for its moderation for the last numbers of decades. They seem to be getting a little more and more immoderate as time goes on. So we met John Huntsman's daughter, and we read a little bit and watched a little bit about John Huntsman, and he was a pretty good candidate, but unfortunately he was the 2012 John Kasich. And Basil hasn't had John Kasich on, and he's out of the race now. He just dropped out today, which paves the way for Donald J. Trump. Now, sometimes we get calls in from Donald J. Trump. And we don't get calls. See, this phone is reserved for Lilith. Hey, Lilith. Sometimes we get calls in on the Nickelodeon phone, Cat and a Half phone, Nickelodeon phone. Sometimes we get calls in on, well, we have 2 inky-dinky phones. One's red. Basil likes that one better because he can see it better. And matter of fact, Basil's been on stage occasionally, and he looks at me. It's like he's looking right through me, and I have to wave this in front of him because cats see red best of all. That's the color that they seem to do the best in recognizing. So John Huntsman, yada yada, not in the race. John Kasich this year, not in the race, and it kind of came down to 2 guys. Jeb Bush, he went He went kaflooey pretty early, too. And he never could get past the fact that Donald Trump kept calling him names. And finally, everybody realized later on that Donald Trump pretty much calls everybody a name. And he teases them, and he ridicules them, and he mocks them, and it's all in good fun. I mean, who named Ted? Who named Ted would mind being called Lion Ted? But so Ted finally dropped out a couple days ago. He lost Indiana, and then took a look at the numbers, and said to himself, "Let me see now. I'm 461 delegates behind in the Republican campaign. I'm 461 behind, and there are 445 delegates left in the primaries that are coming up. 461, 445, and that just didn't seem to make a lot of sense to anybody. So finally dropped out, and Trump called him Lion Ted one more time, and ridiculed Ted's father, Francisco Cruz, and said he was said Ted Cruz's father was in a picture on the cover of National Enquirer, which absolutely made it true. In a picture on the cover of National Enquirer next to Lee Harvey Oswald, and that was pretty good evidence that Cruz, his father, was there with Lee Harvey Oswald, and therefore Cruz must be a serial killer. And so, well, Basil, what about the Democratic Party side? Okay, Basil's hanging in there with Bernie Sanders, and he says he's got a pretty good reason. He says that after Indiana, Bernie Sanders is 290 pledged delegates behind. Of course, almost all the so-called superdelegates, the unpledged delegates, went to Hillary Clinton early on because she was the presumptive candidate. And I'm not so sure if Basil does, but I'm not so sure if I can blame. The heck? What is this? Basil said, once every 2 or 3, 4 months, look in his cat pen, you'll see one of these. Okay. So on the Democratic side, we've got Bernie Sanders, about 290 delegates behind Hillary Clinton, pledged delegates, earned delegates. And there are 1,414 pledged delegates left. So it's definitely a daunting task to try to make up 290 ground with the last 1,114. He has to win a fairly high percentage. Bernie's supposed to do better in coming down the home stretch. He's Oregon, California. There's some states that look like they're much better, and he's projected to win more delegates coming down the home stretch. Because at this point, he's got a little bit over 45% of the pledged delegates to Hillary Clinton's 55%. So we're coming down the home stretch. There's some states left to go. All the super delegates pretty much went for Clinton back when Bernie Sanders wasn't even expected to be in the race. And can't catch her, probably. But he could certainly probably up that 45% up a little bit higher going into the convention. And it's not often that a candidate goes into a party convention with over 45% of their caucus and primary delegates and not look for a little something out of it. And one thing that struck Basil when he was watching the returns last night for Indiana was that one of the questions that they asked, well, there's been a number of questions along the way they've asked in exit polls, and people are pretty honest in exit polls. They generally have nothing to hide. They're willing to say not only who they voted for, but they're willing to say, and in exit polls they'll pick out generally every 10th voter, or they'll get a random sampling based on the number of people coming out. It's just not based on anything about them except for the fact that they were number 10, number 20, number 30, or something of that nature. They choose a number to go by, and they'll ask people questions. And along the way, they've determined that although Hillary Clinton is ahead in pledge delegates as well as superdelegates who are not bound and they don't even actually get to vote until the convention, but even though she's ahead in pledged delegates, when they asked people that voted for Bernie Sanders, are they okay with supporting Hillary Clinton if she's the candidate, if she's the nominee for the party? And you get a pretty good response. People are fairly willing to do that. And on the other side of the coin, Hillary Clinton supporters are absolutely yes. Yeah, if Bernie Sanders is the candidate, and this has been since Iowa, this has been since the very first caucus going into the primary in New Hampshire, caucus in Nevada, primary in South Carolina. People that have voted for Hillary Clinton are pretty satisfied that if Bernie Sanders ends up being the candidate, yeah, they'll vote for him. Now, something happened in Indiana, and I'm not sure exactly why this happened, but when asking the candidates, the supporters who had voted, asking them would they support the other candidate should the other candidate be the nominee, and 32% of Bernie Sanders supporters, people that said they had voted for Bernie Sanders in the Indiana primary, 32% of them said, no, we're not going to vote for Hillary Clinton. We're just not going to vote for her. Now, Donald Trump, we heard of him. You heard of Donald Trump. He's quite the character, and he's been, if you follow him over the decades, he's been pretty much everywhere on every issue. He's been liberal, he's been conservative, he's been this, that, and the other. He's been everywhere on every issue, because Donald Trump seems to be enamored with the notion that if he says things that are perceived as being crazy or interesting, that he gets a lot of airtime, and that's what he seems to like. Matter of fact, Les Moonves, who's the head of CBS Television, was very honest about the Trump campaign. He said to CBS, Donald Trump was the best thing that ever happened to the CBS News, because all they had to do was start a CBS News broadcast with Donald Trump said, and it didn't matter what he said, but bang, people would tune in. They wanted to hear what Trump was up to. They wanted to hear what he had to say. And needless to say, people watch, the advertising ratings go up, and the advertising dollars come flowing in, and that's what we're looking for. I mean, Basil's lost a lot of good corporate sponsors along the way. But we're still angling. We're still angling for Anheuser-Busch. And we don't have any of their products here to... Basil said, said, screw them. They got to give us the money before we even show them on air. We're not going to give them any freebies. This is not the beg Donald Trump to come on and do an interview by showing something of his. Basil wants some cha-ching from Anheuser-Busch. And yet at the same time, every time we talk about Anheuser-Busch and Budweiser beer, Basil wants to bring up the story about how I used to take my kids from Bethel, cross into Middletown and down Route 9 to 95. That was our fastest way to get to Rhode Island, to get to the beaches. Because if you go outside of over the Rhode Island border, you're out of the way of everything that's in the way of the good waves. So we'd go to Misquamicut. Kristen and I go to East Beach now, but we get out of the range of Long Island and Block Island and get some good waves. We see the real ocean out there. And on our way down, we reconnect with 95 and head eastbound. And there was a Budweiser distributorship along the way. And Basil likes to talk about how I would say to my kids, and you know kids in bathroom humor, they love it. So Basil loves to bring up the fact that I would say to my kids in the car, hey, look at that. There's the Budweiser distributorship. And there was a big Clydesdale. I don't know whether it was wood or plastic or styrofoam or whatever. There's a big, pretty much true to life size Clydesdale in the yard of the distributorship. And I'd say to him, hey, I wonder where the beer comes from out of that statue. And of course the kids would, rip roaring, they'd be happy, they'd be glad. Bathroom humor in kids, it works pretty well. It's a pretty easy way to keep them entertained while you're on a 2-hour drive from us to Misquamicut. And we'd leave like 6 in the morning, we'd get there like 8, spend the morning there, and then we'd leave and go have lunch. We leave early in the afternoon because none of us have a very good relationship with the sun. The sun could be pretty brutal on fair-skinned people, and pretty much on anybody for that matter. So we would book out of there and go have lunch and then head back home after playing at the beach and playing in the water during the morning. So Basil, do you think we're going to get any calls from? Basil said, why don't you read a story? I mean, he brought along this little book, and the title of the book is "Sorry, I Barfed on Your Bed," and other heartwarming letters from Kitty. And a cute little book, and there's some little vignettes in there about some. You can't see him there. You can see one of the little cats there. And let's see. And the little vignette says, this one says, "Dear bringer of pests, you see this dead mousey? This is what happens when you cross Marco's floor without saying, 'Hi, Marco, kitty,' and scratching my head. I know you might be tempted to remove the body, but don't. Another mousey looking and smelling exactly like him will just show up tomorrow. And I'll have to kill him all over again. I don't know how the exact same mousey keeps reappearing, but I'm a busy kitty and I have socks to chew through and tinfoil balls to knock under the couch. I can't spend every day killing a mousey. I could swear I already killed. Killing a mousey I could swear I already killed. So please leave it out and remind the mouse that he's actually dead and I'm bored with him. And I love, Marco the Magnificent." Want me to go and read another one? Well, let me find one that looks a little bit like one of our kids, Oswald Cobblepot. Bound to be a black and white cat here somewhere. Let's see. Wow. Huh. Here's one that's an all-white cat. Speaking of white cats, we've been getting phone calls from Donald Trump's 12 cats. Donald Trump has 12 cats. And I'm sure now that he's the candidate and he's got all the other candidates cleared out of the way, there's bound to be more calls from his cats. And he's got 12 cats, and amazingly enough, every one of those 12 cats is named Whitey. I don't know how that happened, but they probably have alternative names because they're not all white. But there probably are names that we really can't say on television because it would be a little bit bad humor. Okay, so there's a white cat and he's standing on his hind legs. He's looking up into the refrigerator. Charlie, 18 months old. And this is about, I know you said in the door, but where? Dear soon-to-be floor mopper, I know you said it's in the door under tinfoil, but where? There are like 3 things covered in foil, and there are 2 shelves in the door. Care to be more specific? Just because my eyes glow at night doesn't mean I have X-ray vision. I know you think kitties are lower maintenance than doggies, but that doesn't mean you can be vague about where my can of food is. How would you like it if my boxes How about if you, like, if I were vague about where my litter box was, and speaking of litter boxes, maybe I'd be able to smell which ones the cat food is in, if my boxes weren't a foot away from the fridge. All I can smell is that you seem to have lost your clump scooper. How can you put my potty in the kitchen and then get angry when I drink from the toilets? I mean, it's not like you care about hygiene. You've got a cat in your refrigerator. Okay. Oh, there's black and white. That's some interesting looking cats. There's a couple of, 3 cats that are I don't know what they're called. They're hairless. They've got really big ears, and their skin is really wrinkly. Dear potential purchaser of many cotton swabs, I guess because of the ears, we know it's adoption day and you're here to take one of us home. That's why you keep staring. It's okay. We know you've never seen anything quite as beautiful as Sphinx kitties. Okay, Sphinx. Most people find it so stunning they can't even believe we're cats. Believe it or not, some humans are jealous and refuse to admit how cute we are. They call us meowing rats. But don't let the deep wrinkles in our forehead fool you. We're not worried. We know we're special. And once people have us around the house for a while, they'll see that we're nothing to sneeze at. Mostly because we're hypoallergenic. Walter does this. Walter, forest cat, feather duster kitty who comes up on the table at home and dusts occasionally. Walter's got a 40-second work week and gets the table pretty clean. It's not a big table, doesn't get too dusty. But then Walter spent a little bit of time hanging up on the railing. Let's see. So, wow. Basil BuddhaCat presents. Are you still there, Elsie? Basil, it's Elsie. She's apparently making her way across Texas, and I don't want to blindside you with this, Elsie, but I think there's a real big packing plant in Kansas City, Missouri. Where is that? Kansas City, Kansas. One of them. And you're not gonna enjoy the end result of where you're going. So I would try to head back to Colorado where your farm is and hang out there. Wait. Okay, she hung up. Guess maybe I better hang up first before we get a call. Hello, Basil BuddhaCat presents. Welcome to Basil-Athon, hour 1860. And we're celebrating, ole ole, we're celebrating Cinco de Mayo. And we're hoping we can get some, if we don't get Budweiser, we're hoping we can at least get cerveza or Dos Equis or something that'll give us a little cha-ching for plugging them on there. But, what? Basil said, Ixnay, said, don't even mention their names until the chichinga comes in. Once we get a little money coming in, then we can mention those brands. Until then, screw them. Okay. So at any rate, who is this anyway? Basil, it's one of Donald J. Trump's cats. One of the 12 of them. Now, we're hearing that you guys are all named Whitey, all 12 of you. Even though aren't all 12 white, in fact, maybe none of you are white, are all named Whitey. I guess she's not going to tell us. Hung up. Okay. Wait a second. It's hello. Now we've had a call from this fellow before. This is I think Snarky Tweety. Check it out and see if this is who I think it is. You check the phone number and yeah, it's Ted Nugent, good friend of Donald Trump, Ted Nugent. Now Ted's pretty well known through the folklore history of rock and roll because Ted wrote a little song called Cat Scratch Fever, in which he described having sex for the first time when he was 10 years old. And he never really explained how old the girlfriend was, or the paramour. Never explained that, so you can only imagine. So he's telling us that he's been, that Donald J. Trump has named him the Donald J. Trump's ambassador to Mexico. So you're going to be involved in doing the wall? You're going to be involved in doing that wall along the Mexican border with the United States? Said no. Actually, he's going to do like he did around his mansion, his home. He's got a moat all the way around his compound, and the compound that's in the moat is can I say it? Okay. Basil says, yeah, go ahead. We'll give him a quick plug. Vaseline intensive care lotion, 100% pure petroleum jelly. And Ted Nugent's telling us that he's going to build a moat between the United States and Mexico. Not the Rio Grande, because the Rio Grande it's shallow at times and in places. It's pretty easy to get across. But he's going to line that moat with Vaseline and watch them pesky Mexicans come across the border. And we're just about out of time. So do you mind if I do a little bit more catfishing? I mean, maybe Walter came along with us. I'm not sure. Well, we're going to keep on catfishing. This has been Basil BuddhaCat presents ! Basil-Athon 2016, hour number 1860, and we'll be back hang around for half an hour, and Progressive Soup comes on at 9:30. That's a show that Basil claims that he got me a foot in the door for. Well, I told him that I got him in the foot in the door to have this show, and he tells me that he got me in to get Progressive Soup on. So 9:30, about a half of an hour from now, Progressive Soup. Probably continuing on talking about the Democratic Party primaries. And this has been Basil BuddhaCat Presents. I'm David Stevenson, Basil's co-host, interpreter, and Chief Gofer. Basil BuddhaCat Presents, center slot, and the cat of all cats. And we'll see you Friday night at 10 p.m. and then we'll see you Sunday morning at 11 a.m. where we do our more religious show because Basil, like me, is...
They say they'd rob your grandma blind on Wall Street, fritter her away, her man.